Thank you, Phil Estes, for joining me today for Alcide Breakfast Club. Everyone here, especially me, is thrilled to kind of have you here. All views, opinions are definitely personal and have nothing to do with our employers. For those that bizarrely do not know you, what should they know about Phil Estes?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to see you. For the last 6 years, I've been working pretty actively in the open source side of the container ecosystem, initially contributing to the Docker engine, during those crazy days of 2014, 2015, when everyone was all excited about containers and Docker.
Docker was heading world domination.
Yes, on their way. It was an awesome time. That was a great open source community. I thoroughly enjoyed getting involved. As you can see, I'm not like a young kid, so I already had almost 20 years of experience in software, but I would say, that couple-year period really revitalized my coding skills and, doing everything in the open. I'd been involved in Linux at IBM, so I was a big fan of open source and knew a lot about open source, but really the Docker engine was my first kind of huge, just 100% commitment to working on open source day and night. I don't pretend to be a security expert. It's an area of strong interest for me, and friendships with you and others in that space has been valuable to just learn and go deeper kind of on the security side.
And when you are off the grid, what's kind of keep you busy?
I love cycling.
Watching cycling on TV from the sofa or actively?
It's my form of exercise, getting out, riding, road bike. I've got friends in the area that we, do group rides.
If we were to have breakfast, what would I see on your plate?
Traveling, there's that sort of standard British English breakfast. I love the kind of eggs and bacon or sausage and toast.
KubeCon San Diego, which was the last time we met, which is pretty much kind of our normal touch point. I had nice breakfast in San Diego.
Yeah.
So, what's your take, the boring COVID-19? How far are we to get back to apparently normal?
Yeah, boy, that's a...
Or maybe I'll rephrase. When is the next physical KubeCon?
It'll be really interesting to see if they can hold Boston, which would be November.
Tentatively.
I certainly hope the U.S. gets our arms around this by then, but yeah, it's really hard to predict.
For anyone, that is kind of diving into the space of containerized workloads, Kubernetes or even serverless, where you would recommend them to kind of, take a deep dive, think about what's ahead or what's around the corner?
For years, we've been telling people containers are not a new thing. The technologies they were built on, they've been around forever in the Linux kernel. And those isolation primitives are combined with other technologies, make a pretty good layered onion.
Do you see the ecosystem go the sandboxing way and kind of even walking away from bare bone containers, meaning that we are going the hypervisor kind of way, or even unikernels?
For example, if I run a public cloud build system where anyone can submit a build, and within that build they can run any command, those kind of environments, or a functions as a service offering where people are submitting jobs, functions,
untrusted stuff, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in that arena, there definitely is going to be a big move toward those kind of extra isolation primitives. Unikernels are this idea of, similar to gvisor, maybe I don't like the fact that this Linux kernel has hundreds and hundreds of syscalls, and I don't want to write special profiles to limit that. I want to re-implement the pieces I need as libraries and then link my application to that replacement kernel. And that's really what unikernels are, your application and just the pieces of the kernel, maybe the network stack and some syscalls. I think what we'll see in the next year is maybe some work around the CRI to like better support VMs as a runtime option. And there's people already, working on some of that.
You've been kind of in the open source, in a pretty kind of high-profile project, trying to take you to the politically incorrect side of things. Like, what's the downside of open source from your perspective?
Obviously, depending on your assumed risk or your assumed, where you're running code, whose code you're running, obviously people are interested in, is there another layer to this onion I can add? I mean, every public cloud is involved in these same open source projects in some way. Everybody's there: Google, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, Red Hat. It's interesting how much more passion there is in open source, both in good and bad ways. Like, good in the way that, like, my code's going to be out there for everyone to see. I'm going to make sure it's the best possible code, and I'm going to defend it. On the other side of the spectrum, passions also mean, things get hot really quickly when people get disappointed or disagree. The OCI has been one aspect, the CNCF maybe another, where there's been some attempt to bring some principles of openness and governance that try and make sure that everyone gets a voice. It's absolutely true that many large vendors were concerned about the future of the container ecosystem, but definitely the summer that the CNCF and the OCI were formed, there were lots of people discussing how to kind of slow the spread of Docker's, domination on that scene. Istio's, I guess they just had that announcement, which I assume means CNCF. I can't imagine where else they would put it, but there are other places, I guess.
Linux Foundation, like Apache, or I don't know,
yeah,
what they come up with, or CNCF v2 or something. If you had a time machine, going back in time and drinking beer with Salman Hayek from Docker, what would you tell him? Like,
I did talk with Solomon a lot during those days. Thankfully, I ended up having a good relationship with him. We talked a lot about the need for something like Containerd. What I would say today is that a lot of those discussions went on way too long. I think we could have done Containerd a year earlier than we did it and put it in CNCF immediately, and released a lot of the negative pressure that was on Docker as a company at the time. There was some protectionism, which I think for a small startup was understandable.
That's their assets,
There were decisions that were made that now in hindsight, walled them off from people that could have helped them. I don't fault that group. I think they were a great group of folks who had a passion and a vision for containers that definitely did change the industry.
I'm going to test your kind of emotional / professional reflexes. Open policy agent.
The next big thing to replace pod security policy.
Unikernels.
Lots of promise, but not much interest or use yet.
Service mesh interface.
I always feel too low level to have a strong opinion about these higher layer things.
Shifting left and DevSecOps.
Bringing security awareness to the developer seems to be the next big horizon.
Serverless and Knative.
I see less jokes on Twitter about no more servers. The hype curve is turning into reality that there's a lot of mixed mode applications using functions, and someone finally defined it the other day, the jam stack. So having a static website and then using functions as like the API, JavaScript.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you doing this.